Before we get started on the Dharma talk, please join me in invoking the Buddha's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Dear Venerable Tai, dear Sangha, good afternoon. So, Abbot and I are starting the Dharma talks on the Lotus Sutra. Now, a couple weeks ago, he gave a quick introduction of the sutra, but I'm going to reintroduce the sutra again. In a few weeks, we'll have the new chant books for the Lotus Sutra that I've been working on for the past 3 or 4 years, on and off. So I'm glad I'm finally done with it. So it'll be a Cliff Notes version of the entire sutra. So the sutra in itself is 28 chapters. We will still be chanting 28 chapters, but it'll be a very condensed form of the 20 chapters, so it's actually chantable. And so we'll start that in a couple of weeks. So, the Lotus Sutra, also known as the Saddharma Pundarika Sutra, the Sutra on the Lotus of the Wonderful Law, is one of the most famous and influential Mahayana sutras there are. In our tradition specifically, the Tiantai, it's our main sutra that we use, along with the Amitabha Sutra and the Parinirvana Sutra. But the Lotus Sutra is our main bulk chunk, is our Bible, I guess, per se. Trying to figure out where I want to start with this. But as the Abbot mentioned last time, the sutra is divvied up into 2 main kind of sections, I guess, right? There's a historical dimension aspect to it and an ultimate dimension aspect to it. So the historical aspect is pretty much the time around when the Buddha existed. So it goes over his own life, his birth, his leave of the home life into monastic life, and his enlightenment and his teachings, etc., etc. And then the ultimate dimension, which is the second half of the sutra itself, goes more in line of kind of out of this world type of scenarios and things. It's the ultimate dimension is essentially where birth and death, coming and going, this and that, life and death don't exist. This is essentially nirvana, right? This is the place, the aspect, the dimension that we all will eventually attain to upon enlightenment. But the main story, the main message of the Lotus Sutra, unlike some other bigger sutras or Mahayana sutras, is that everybody has the ability to attain Buddhahood. Okay? And so if we kind of backtrack a little bit, right? And so in the days of the Buddha, when he was teaching, and about 150 years after the Buddha passed, there's only just original Buddhism, right? And so there was just one school, it was one Vinaya, one sutra collection, one precept collection, etc., etc. And so about 150 years after the Buddha's parinirvana is when the monastic Sangha kind of split. And it split into the school of Theravada, which is the way of the elders, and the Mahasangika Vada, which is the school of the majority. So the Theravada was considered a kind of a conservative tradition, conservative school, where the Mahasangika was more progressive. The Theravada school, as we may or may not know, they their highest attainment in their practice is the arhat, or worthy one, right? This is the highest attainment someone's able to attain, the fourth level of enlightenment, the arhat. So that's their ceiling, right? They don't believe that we are able to achieve bodhisattvahood or even Buddhahood. However, the Mahayana part of the tradition says, well, that's not really the case. Because even in early Buddhist sutras, the Buddha himself mentioned of other Buddhas in existence, right? And so if there are other Buddhas in existence, that means there are other bodhisattvas in existence as well. And so if there are more than just himself, that means the capability of being able to attain bodhisattvahood or Buddhahood is doable, achievable, attainable. And so the Buddhism, after it split, it kind of went into three kind of stages, right? So we have like original Buddhism, then we have what we would now call mini schools Buddhism, because even with the split into the Mahasanghika, there were 18 schools or traditions, 18 schools of Buddhism. At one point, according to records, we had up to 26 or 27 schools, so there's a lot of them. Even to today, there's 9 main schools of Buddhism. And so there's original Buddhism, mini schools Buddhism, and then Mahayana, right? And Mahayana stems from the Mahasanghika split. And after the Mahasanghika school kind of arose, one of the first Mahayana sutras that came out of that split was the Prajnaparamita Sutras, or the Sutras of Perfection of Wisdom. These were the first sutras that came into Mahayana. And one of the oldest Prajnaparamita Sutras, and one of the historically first books that were ever created, was the Diamond Sutra, the Prajnapadika Sutra, Paramita Sutra. And so the Diamond Sutra is one of my also main sutras, but it's a very influential, very deep and difficult sutra, but the Prajnaparamita was one of them, one of the first collections. When Mahayana Buddhism was being developed, Mahayana practitioners call any school that didn't apply or were included in the Mahayana, they were called Hinayana. Because Mahayana literally means, Maha means great, Yana means vehicle, or way, or path. And so Hinayana means small vehicle. And so we typically don't use the word Hinayana anymore because it's kind of derogatory, but it doesn't matter. But anyone that practiced anything that wasn't Mahayana were considered Hinayana. But now we just stick to, most of the original Hinayana schools have kind of died out. And so anything that is not Mahayana, we now call Theravada. And there's still a few traditions of Theravada still in existence, most notably the Thai forest tradition. But as the monastic sangha or institution kind of developed, right, the conservative side of the Theravadas became very inflexible. It became very limited, right? Because the Theravada, because their highest achievement or attainment is the arhat, right? That means they are practicing and trying to achieve attainments for themselves, right? And once they achieve arhat, they enter nirvana, and that's it. But the Mahasanghika saw that this was or could potentially become an issue because it didn't address some of the kind of cultural diversities at the time, right? The people wanted more flexibility in being able to practice with the lay practitioners as well. Because at the time, or even now still, right, in Theravada side of things, because the Theravada is very considered conservative, right, and very kind of strict on their rules and regulations and their practices, that being able to leave the family life and practice the austerities and the discipline of a monastic wasn't very doable for a lot of people, right? And so the best that they can do is to serve the Sangha by providing alms and donations, right, in order to gain merit so that they can be reborn in a better life, the next life, right? And so because they didn't have any ability to, or they didn't have the concept of, I can't become a Buddha because I can't become a Buddha because I can't become a monastic, they just didn't practice. All they did was just provide alms and gain merits. So when the Mahasanghika came around, they're like, we need to be more inclusive. We need to, Buddhism is a living tradition. It needs to be, it needs to evolve and encompass more than just the monastics. And so that was one of the kind of winning points of Mahayana, is like, hey, you can be a part of the Sangha, you can be part of the Sangha, you can become Sangha, like everybody now is part of the Sangha. Because in the Theravada view, the Sangha, right, only consists of the monastics, of monks and nuns. Whereas in the Mahayana side, the Sangha is, we now use the term fourfold Sangha. The fourfold Sangha are the monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, right? The bhikshus, bhikshunis, the upasakas, and upasikas. This is the fourfold Sangha. This is the Sangha in the Mahayana term, in the Mahayana part. And then finally, around the 1st century BC, is when the Mahasanghika lineage, or the Mahayana, start to evolve, and the practices and philosophies of the Mahayana start to develop and kind of go into circulation. But still, it only had a few bits and pieces here and there. There was no established institution yet, or no established organization yet, because it was just a bunch of ideas and concepts. There was no Vinaya yet, right? There was no sutra collection yet. There was no precept collection yet. And so after they started to appear and more sutras started to develop, after the Prajnaparamita Sutra came the Ratnakutta Sutra, which is a sutra on the collection of jewels, and the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Garland Flower Sutra, and the Vimalakirti Sutra, the discourse on Vimalakirti. Vimalakirti is a very good sutra. It's not extremely long. It's not short either. It's a good chunk. But the Vimalakirti Sutra is very influential. Vimalakirti was a lay practitioner at the time who had very high knowledge, was very wise. And the sutra kind of goes into a debate between him and Shariputra and some of the other main disciples at the time, essentially debating on topics of the Dharma. And Vimalakirti won those debates for the most part. And so he was a very wise practitioner. But the sutra, the Vimalakirti Sutra, is very influential because it showcases that you do not have to be a monastic in order to have wisdom, in order to have attainments, right? Sure, it's easier to become enlightened. It's easier to have attainments as a monastic because you don't have the influence of outside life. You don't have the influence of family and job obligations and worldly obligations. So it's easier to be able to focus your entire practice on the practice. But that doesn't mean it's impossible to become enlightened as a layperson, right? It's very much possible. I've met several people who are at least Srotapatanas, right? Stream enterers, the first level of enlightenment. There are lay people, lay practitioners. And so once the Mahayana Buddhists starting to form, and they needed, there was not yet any, let me backtrack. Because the Mahayana not only emphasized that we're all capable of becoming Buddhas, but that everyone's essentially a bodhisattva in training, right? A bodhisattva, bodhi means wisdom or enlightenment, and sattva means being, so it's an enlightened being. And so the aspiration of any Mahayana practitioner is to become a bodhisattva. What's different between a bodhisattva and a Buddha is that a bodhisattva, even when becoming fully enlightened, they postpone their entrance into nirvana in order to help other people become enlightened. And only when all beings, all sentient beings have become enlightened, where they're like, okay, they throw in the towel and like, I'm going to nirvana, I'm done, or my job is done, right? And so because of the Mahayana emphasized the bodhisattva path, there's no bodhisattva precepts. At the time, all they had was either the 5 precepts for the lay people and the pratimoksha, the precepts for monks and nuns, right? Those are the only precepts that were available. It wasn't until the Brahmajala Sutra, the Brahmanet Sutra, once that was kind of created, it introduced the 58 precepts of the Bodhisattva, 10 main precepts and 10 major precepts and 48 minor precepts. And so now the Mahayana Sangha, the fourfold Sangha, because the Bodhisattva precepts are shared between monks and between monastics and lay people. And so whether you take the Bodhisattva precepts as a lay person, right, for in our tradition, you take it about 2 years after you've taken your 5 precepts, right? And then for monastics, even if you've already taken Bodhisattva precepts, like I had before I was ordained, during ordination, you retake the Bodhisattva precepts. So these are precepts that are shared by both monastics and lay people. And so now there's a more, there's a inclusive kind of atmosphere between monastics and lay people when it comes to the Mahayana practice. Once the Lotus Sutra came into, or started to develop, the Lotus Sutra didn't happen all at once, right? It came in stages and it worked in stages. Most sutras during the Buddha's time and even after his life, all sutras were written, they weren't written yet, but they were verbally transmitted by verse, in verse form. Because verse form is very poetic, it's very easy to memorize and learn and recite, and that's how the Shravakas, the voice hearers of the time, right, the disciples of the Buddha, were able to learn and memorize and recite the sutras, because everything was in verse. And so the original creation of the lotus was also in verse. The prose, which is the longer pieces of the sutra, which we call now sutra, prose sutra, wasn't added until later on. And so the sutra, as the Sanskrit word, means like thread. Right? It's essentially threading the connection between the prose and the verses. Right? It's also our root word for suture, right? Or suturing. And so it's oftentimes when we read Mahayana Sutras and we see all the prose and we see the verse, we sometimes often think that the verses are the summation of the prose, right? Summarizing what the prose said. But it's actually not always necessary. The prose was included to add onto the verse, to expand on defining and give the more expansive story on the verse. And so in the Lotus Sutra, at least, almost every chapter has both verse and prose. But not all sutras have both. There are some sutras that don't have any verses, verses, like the Amitabha Sutra, for instance, right? It's just one long prose. And if you've read the Lotus Sutra, it's very theatrical. Most Mahayana sutras are very theatrical because it was written at a time where a lot of when Buddhism started to develop, when the first sutra started to develop, right, during the time in India, there was a lot of new popular religions also emerging at the same time, right? A lot of new, like epic texts were arising, and they were all in this kind of theatrical setting, because it was easy to make it more into a kind of a drama, right, and kind of set the stage of how things are, because that's how people at the time learned, that's how they got education and religious and philosophical teachings, was by theater, essentially. And so when we read the sutra and a lot of other Mahayana sutras, it showcases this exuberant kind of ideas and imagery that are beyond our concept of space and time, beyond our concept of our imagination. And it showcases like these grand themes of these large bodhisattvas and these large Buddha lands and these, epic visualizations. If you go back, even in the Amitabha Sutra that we chant every evening, right, it tells us that of Sukhavati, the land of ultimate bliss, Amitabha's land, is made out of, the ground is made out of gold, right? And all the staircases and the pavilions and the terraces are made of lapis lazuli and crystal, and it showcases everything's made out of the 7 treasures: gold, silver, lapis lazuli, crystal, mother pearl, red pearl, and carnelian. Everything's made out of these 7 treasures, even the trees, right? All the calyxes of flowers are made of these jewels. The pools are as clear as blue as lapis and as clear as the sky, right? Everything is just so dramatic, right? And this isn't to take things at face value. This isn't to take these things literally. But it's just to show you, right, to help you visualize what the teaching is about, right? It's oftentimes, especially the first few times I read the Lotus Sutra 20 years ago, I was reading, I'm like, this is just one big mythology, sorry, right? Because it's telling us about all these different humans and non-human beings and all these other creatures and lands far away and this and that. And I'm reading through all these chapters and I'm like waiting for the Lotus Sutra, right? Because the entire Lotus Sutra is telling us about the Buddha teaching the Lotus Sutra. And so as I'm going through the sutra, I'm like, okay, well, where is the Lotus Sutra? Right? It never actually gives the Lotus Sutra. And that's that was an epiphany that happened one day to me. One day during meditation, I was thinking about it, I was meditating on it, and the Lotus Sutra isn't the Lotus Sutra. The Lotus Sutra is is more like a teaser about what the Lotus Sutra is capable of doing. And in this case, the theme of the Lotus Sutra is about unity. So it's unifying all the different schools and traditions of Buddhism. It's unifying the 3 vehicles that the Buddha taught at the time, right? The vehicle of the Shravakas, Prateka Buddhas, and the Bodhisattvas. The Shravakas, which is all of us, the voice hearers, right? The monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen. We're the Shravakas. And so the Buddha was emphasizing that even though throughout my entire life I've taught you these 3 vehicles, in the way of these 3 vehicles, but in essence there's only one vehicle, the Buddha vehicle, right? There's no Bodhisattva yana again vehicle. There's no Bodhisattva path. There's only the Buddha yana, the Buddha vehicle. And so that's the beauty of the sutra. It teaches and it shows us in a very compassionate way that regardless of who you are, regardless of your class, regardless of your gender, regardless of your educational level, we all have the capability of attaining Buddhahood. We all have that Buddha nature. right? In chapter 12, on Devadatta, it tells the story of a little girl. She's a princess. She's the princess of the Naga king. She's only 8 years old. And at the time, when I believe it's Shariputra was debating with another bodhisattva about how only he was taking the conservative view of Theravada, where you have to become a monk in order to become enlightened, and only a monk, not even a nun, right? The best we can do is attain arhatship, right? At the best. But then the other bodhisattva was saying, no, that's not the case, because I've met this Naga princess who's only 8 years old, and she has all the capability, all the wisdom of a Buddha. And so your logic of you have to be a man, you have to be a monk in order to become enlightened is false. And so as soon as Shariputra was about to open his mouth to say, to debate back, this little girl appeared in front of the whole assembly and said, "What's up? I'm here." And so then there's a dialogue between her and Shariputra, and she said, I'm trying to remember the story. She offered something to the Buddha, right? And so she asked Shariputra, how quickly did I give this offering to the Buddha, and how quickly did he take it? And Shariputra replied that, he accepted it very quickly. And she said, that's right. Me becoming a Buddha will happen even quicker than that. And so by going into samadhi, right, this deep meditative state, she transformed herself through all these different versions of beings until she was able to show everyone that she too can become a Buddha, or was a Buddha, is a Buddha. So she became a Buddha in front of everyone's eyes. And so she shut down Shariputra's illogical reasoning that not everybody can become a Buddha. And so all the chapters after that were stories and prophecies of all the disciples of the Buddha at the time, or with him, saying that they will all attain Buddhahood as well. But in the Lotus Sutra, we'll see that there's we have to understand that the Mahayana tradition is not something that is made up, right? Because all the core teachings in Mahayana are also in Theravada, right? The only difference is the Mahayana sutras, it expands upon the original sutras, right? If we go back to the Theravada sutras, right, in the Tripitaka, the three baskets, and the Sutta Pitaka, there's five categories of sutras in our sutra collection. There's the long discourses, the middle discourses, the short discourses, the numerical discourses, and the connected discourses, right? And so all the Mahayana sutras also have all these five collections as well. But what Mahayana thinkers and scholars did, was take those sutras and expand on the sutras that emphasized the bodhisattva ideal and the potential for Buddhahood. And so in Mahayana, we always emphasize the bodhisattva path, the bodhisattvayana, path of the bodhisattva. And we emphasize that we are all capable of attaining Buddhahood, and we're able to attain Buddhahood by our practice. And then within the Lotus Sutra, it showcases all the fundamental teachings. It mentions the Four Noble Truths as essential. It mentions the Eightfold Path as essential. It mentions that dependent origination, pratitya samutpada, is essential. The six paramitas, six perfections, is essential, right? And then it brings in along with the links of dependent origination, also mentions emptiness, or shunyata, right? And so the Lotus Sutra is just it's a beautiful sutra, because it's a collection, it's a summation of all of the Buddha's main teachings, kind of pulled into one. And every chapter includes a lot of storytelling, a lot of parables, a lot of similes, right? Because at the time, and even now, right, we are able to better remember things when it's in a kind of a story version, right? When I was teaching on the Dhammapada, for instance, right, every verse of the Dhammapada had a story associated with it according as to why the verse was given. And I could remember all the stories because I read them and listened to them and learned them as stories. But if I learned and listened to them and knew them as just points of text, I would never be able to remember them, right? And so there's a lot of beautiful and kind of a little, maybe sometimes out there stories in the Lotus, but they're all fundamentally trying to help you visualize and recognize the potential that you all have. One of my two of my favorite stories in the Lotus Sutra. One is of the burning house, and it's a long story, but essentially there's a burning house, right? It's falling apart. There's creatures in there, there's animals and things tearing each other apart, and the building's about to collapse because it's very old and there's hundreds of people that live in there. And the owner of the house, the Buddha, had his 3 sons in the house, right? They were stuck in the house because they were playing their games. They were too amused with their toys and their games that they didn't even recognize that there was a fire happening around them, right? And so in order to get them out of the house, the Buddha tempted them with better, bigger toys and games outside, right? And so he was telling his sons, hey, look, I got this really big, in the story it's a carriage, right? That's drawn by ox and horse and it's filled with different treasures and gems, etc., etc. And so he tempted the 3 sons out of the house to have this one large new toy. Now, does that 3-in-1 sound familiar to you? The 3 vehicles coming out to the 1 vehicle. And so reading that story, it helped us recognize that this burning house is this life in samsara. It's this life in the saha world. It's full of chaos. It's full of suffering. So all the animals that are inside, all these insects and all these animals that are hunting each other and tearing each other apart, all this death, all this grossness, all this suffering and chaos that's in the house, this is what we already live by. This is how we already live our lives, with all this chaos and suffering, right? Even though we're part of the 3 vehicles, right? Even though we're Shravakas, we are still obsessed with these things. And until we're able to escape that into the one Buddhahood, into the one vehicle, Buddha vehicle, then we can finally escape. My second favorite story is, I forget what chapter it is, but it's medicinal herbs. And this story showcases that the Dharma is like rain that falls onto the ground. Rain, just like the air that we breathe, does not discriminate between the big trees, the small trees, and large trees, and doesn't discriminate between the grass or the flowers, right? The rain fills and nourishes and hydrates all plants and trees equally, right? If you're a large tree, then the tree takes in as much water as it needs to survive. Small trees do the same, the middle trees do the same, right? And so the Buddha describes that in the way that the Buddha taught at the time, he taught the Dharma. He may have one subject, let's say the Four Noble Truths, for instance, but according to his audience, according to who he is giving the talk to, he may change the way he teaches according to their capability, according to their understanding. And so if it is at a small little village that are uneducated or illiterate, he would teach them in a way that they would be able to understand. But if he was in a larger city or teaching to the high ministers or the royals who were educated, who were literate, who did have knowledge of philosophy and religion, he would teach them at a level that they would understand. So according to his teaching, even though it's the same subject, he would teach it in a different way so that everybody had the capability to understand. Which is why we have tens of thousands of sutras. We don't have one book. We have tens and thousands of sutras. And a lot of them are repetitive because they're all taught in a different way, but they're teaching the same subject. Likewise, when he's describing the rain, the Dharma rain, right, he teaches the Dharma equally to all, but according to their understanding and their capability, they will take in what they can. Right? And so to me, that's always been just a very cool aha moment. So as we, in a few weeks, once we get all the new chant books, I divvied up the 28 chapters into 8 sections, and that we would chant one section every week. And so each section would have about, depending on the length of the chapter, anywhere between 3 or 4 chapters, right? Again, these are condensed versions, so at max it would be like 20 pages of chanting. Promise isn't that much. But it is the only way, I believe, that we would be able to really absorb and take in the Lotus Sutra without worrying about chanting the entire chapter. Because we do that for the Vietnamese services. And trust me, it is lengthy and tiring. And I do not want to bestow that suffering upon you. I will have to do it because that's my job, but I do not want you to have to go through it. So I've worked on it for 3-4 years so that we can all chant it. So hopefully in a few weeks, once the final edits are complete by our Venerable Abbot and gives me the go-ahead, we'll make those orders. Okay, I'm stop talking now. What are your questions, concerns, emotional outbursts? Yes, sir. As far out as his legs would allow him to. I don't know the answer to that question. Far. Well, I don't know far, but around India for sure. What is now Nepal. It wasn't until after the end of his life where monks, monastics in general, started to go outside of India. And it wasn't until, I believe it was either 3rd or 2nd century BC, when Buddhism finally reached as far as Sri Lanka. I believe that's the time frame. Anyway, Google it. I'm sorry, I don't really know the answer. Yes, Joseph.
There were additional teachers in the Theravada school of thought. Is there additional Buddha teachers throughout time that help spread the Dharma and the Mahayana that similar, that are recognizable to where we're studying? Because I know there's the Buddha, but there's also other people who made additions onto the Dharma from just Buddha's beginnings. There's other building blocks that came in from other Buddha's perspective, additions. So
I don't understand your question.
the question is, are there any other Mahayana teachers that were of great value to add on to the Mahayana?
There has been a lot of great influential monastics, mostly in China and some in Vietnam as well. the names are missing me. Venerable Huaswan, for instance, the abbot of the city of 10,000 Buddhas in California. What's the city called? That one. He's very influential of Mahayana Buddhism. He comes from the Avatamsaka school, which is also the school that very strictly follows the monastic precepts. And then there's some in Taiwan, I can't remember their names, but the abbot of Dharma Drum Mountain and Fo Guangshan. These are very influential monks that kind of helped just modernize, I guess, Mahayana a little bit more, right? Even though Mahayana is very progressive compared to Theravada, it has become more of what Thich Nhat Hanh would call engaged Buddhism, right? It's very humanistic Buddhism is the word I'm looking for. And so there's a capability of Mahayana Buddhism to not just help you in your Dharma study and in your practice, but being able to take those practices outside of temple and apply them to your everyday life, right? And so there's the emphasis on stuff like mindfulness, for instance, right? Because mindfulness can be practiced in and out of meditation. It can be practiced 24/7 if you're aware enough, right? And being mindful in your everyday life is going to help you to stabilize your mind and see how the mind is working, especially in situations where you are in an argument, for instance, right? If you're unaware, if you're unmindful during an argument, you're probably going to think and say and do stupid stuff that you're maybe going to later regret. But if you're aware enough and mindful enough, as you're in the argument and you're seeing how the mind works and how it's reacting to what is happening, you have the potential to stop that negative, unwholesome thinking before you start to say negative things and do negative things, right? And so there's an aspect of Mahayana Buddhism where it's more of more than just a practice that you do at the temple, right? And so a lot of these influential Mahayana teachers help make that a reality, I guess, in a way, which I'm okay with. But I'm also a semi-traditionalist as well when it comes to monastic life. But it's beside the point. I'm sorry? Dalai Lama, yes. Dalai Lama is part of the Vajrayana tradition, which is technically under the Mahayana umbrella, but it's also considered its own tradition because it has a very strong influence of the Tibetan's cultural religion Bon, and so they mix that local religion with Buddhism, and so because it's so can be very different, it's now considered its own third tradition aside from Theravada and Mahayana. Technically, it falls under the Mahayana umbrella. They may adjust the way they perceive things, but we're not allowed to change what's already in the sutras. Every sutra is true. There's no wrong necessarily, right? But the interpretation we have or the perception we have of what it's trying to tell us will be different. And that perception and idealization of things changes throughout time as time changes. Any other last questions? If not, then we will go to transfer the merit and go to chanting. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. Also, a quick announcement, starting next week, we will be adding meditation back to our Sunday services, but it will be before the service. So starting at 11:30 till 12:15, we will have sitting meditation. So you're welcome to come anytime between that time or starting at 11:30. And then depending on accessibility, we will also have tea and crumpets after the service. More like tea and snacks, but tea for sure. Assuming there's nothing else needing to happen. The general service or the New Year service? The general service or the New Year service?
Yeah, okay.
Please go to page 185.
Prayer for peace. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. O great blessed Buddha, you are the treasury of compassion and wisdom and bestower of supreme inner peace. You who love all beings without exception are the source of happiness and goodness that guide us to the path of liberation. The fourfold Sangha gathered today to welcome the new year, to pay homage to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the 10 directions, and to bless the year with health, prosperity, and understanding. The inexhaustible virtues the world honor one cannot be adequately praised. We at Fukway Buddhist Temple of San Antonio on this day gather as fourfold Sangha come to altar, meditate, and chant, praise the virtuous action of the Buddha, and offer this prayer. May the path of the Buddha grow brighter. May the Dhamma become clearer. May this world and country be at peace. May all follow the way of right practice. May nature be safe. May people everywhere be free and equal. May the path of liberation appear to everyone and the Dhamma rainfall everywhere, benefiting all beings. May the Sangha practice diligently, showing concern and love for each other as they would for their own family. We aspire to follow the example of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the 10 directions. We welcome another year to our lives and pray all sentient beings be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they be healthy, happy, and successful in their aspiration. Namo Sakya Muni Buddha. Namo Sakya Muni Buddha. Namo Sakya Muni Buddha. Inviting the bell. Buddhist
Speech and mind in perfect oneness, I send my heart along with the sound of the bell. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend all anxiety and sorrow. Listen, listen, this wonderful sound brings me back to my true home.
Incense offering. In
gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space and time. May it be fragrant as earth herself, reflecting our careful efforts, our wholehearted mindful, and the fruit of understanding slowly ripening. May we and all beings be companions of Buddha and Bodhisattvas. May we awaken from forgetfulness and realize our true home.
Opening verse. The
incense in the censer now is burning, all the Dharma realm in every place, auspicious clouds appearing, our sincere intention thus fulfilling, as all Buddhas now show their perfect body. Homage to the incense cloud canopy, Bodhisattva and great Bodhisattvas.
First is for bowing. Homage
to the eternally abiding Buddhas, the supreme Dharma and satially Sangha throughout the Dharma realm and the realm of empty space and three periods of time.
Homage
to the fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha, Maitreya, honored future Buddha, Manjushri, great wisdom Bodhisattva, Pandang Bodhisattva, all Dharma guarding Deva Bodhisattvas, and the
multi-assembly
of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas.
Om Estu
Amitabha Buddha in the land of ultimate bliss, Avalokiteshvara, great compassion, Bodhisattva, great strength, Bodhisattva, earth stored, great vow, Bodhisattva, and the assembly of great pure sea light, Bodhisattvas.
Please sit down. The great compassion mantra, Namo.
Great compassionate Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Namo. Great compassion Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Namo. Great compassionate Buddhas and Bodhisattvas.
Namo Ratnataya.
Namo Aryavalokiteshvaraya, Bodhisattvaya, Mahasatvaya, Mahakarunikaya, Om Sarvaravaye, Sodanadasya, Namaskritva Imam Arya, Valokiteshvara Ramdava, Namo Narakindi, Hrimahavaswami, Sarva Arhatu Shobham, Ajiyam, Sarva Sattva, Namo Vasava, Namo Vagama Vitatu, Tadyatha Om Avaloke Lokate, Karate Hiri, Mahabodhisattva, Sarva Sarva, Mala Mala, Mahi Mahi Hridayam, Koro Koro Karmam, Doro Doro Vijati, Maha Vijati, Dara Dara, Dirini Shvaraya, Chala Chala, Mama Vimala, Mukta Lehi, Shiva Shiva, Asham Prashadi Vishva Vishram Prashaya Holo Mara Holo Holo Hri Sara Sara Siri Siri Soro Soro Bodhiya Bodhiya Bodhaya Bodhaya Maitreya Narakendi Krishanina Mayamana Swaha Siddhaya Swaha Mahasiddhaya Swaha Siddhayogi Shvaraya Swaha Narakendi Swaha Maranara Swaha Sira Simha Mokaya Swaha Sarva Mahasiddhaya Swaha Chakra Siddhaya Swaha Padma Kasaya Swaha Narakendi Vagalaya Swaha Mavari Sankaraya Swaha Namo Ratnatrayaya Namo Arya Valokite Shvaraya Swaha Om Siryanto Mantra Padaya Swaha.
The Dhamma
body is bringing morning light and concentration. My heart is at peace. A half smile is born on my lips. This is a new day and I vow to go through it in mindful. The sun of wisdom has risen, shining in every direction. Noble Sangha, diligently bring your mind into meditation. Namo Shakyamunaye Buddhaya. Namo Shakyamunaye Buddhaya. Namo Shakyamunaye Buddhaya.
First opening is Sutra, the
Surpass profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear it, receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.
The Sutra on happiness. Thus I have
heard how one time the Buddha dwelt as Shravasti in the Jeta grove in the garden of the benefactor of orphans and the solitary. Late at night a deva appeared whose light and beauty made the whole Jeta grove shine radiantly. After paying respects to the Buddha, the deva asked him a question, saying in verse, many gods and men are eager to know what are the greatest blessings which bring about a peaceful and happy life. Please, Tathagata, will you teach us? The Buddha replied, not to be associated with the foolish ones, to live in the company of of wise people, honoring those who are worth honoring. This is the greatest happiness, to live in a good environment, to have planted good seeds, and to realize that you are on the right path. This is the greatest happiness, to have a chance to learn and grow, to be skillful in your profession, or practicing the precepts and loving speech. This is the greatest happiness, to be able to serve and support your parents, to cherish your own family, to have a vocation you joy. This is the greatest happiness, to live honestly, generous in giving, to offer support to relatives and friends, living a life of blameless conduct. This is the greatest happiness, to avoid unwholesome actions, not caught by alcoholism or drugs, and to be diligent in doing good. This is the greatest happiness, to be humble and polite in manner, to be grateful and content with a simple life, not missing the occasion, the Dharma. This is the greatest happiness, to preserve and be open to change, to have regular contact with monks and nuns, and to fully participate in Dharma discussions. This is the greatest happiness, to live diligently and attentively, to perceive the noble truths, and to realize nirvana. This is the greatest happiness, to live in the world with your heart undisturbed by the world, with all sorrows ended, dwelling in peace. This is the greatest happiness, for he or she who accomplishes this unvanquished, wherever they are safe and happy. Happiness lives within oneself. Namo Buddha, thus come one worthy of offerings, a proper and universal knowledge, perfect in understanding and conduct, skillful in leaving the world through liberation, perfect and complete understanding of all worldly dharma, unsurpassed, night taming hero, teacher of gods and people, Buddha, the world honored one.
The Paramita, the
Bodhisattva Avalokita, while moving in the discourse of Prajna Paramita, shed light on the five skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill-being. Listen, Shariputra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is not other than. The same is true with feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and conscious. Listen, Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed. neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreasing. Therefore in emptiness there is neither form nor feelings, no perception, formations, nor consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue, nor body or mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of, no realms of elements, no interdependent origins, and no extinction of them, no ill-being, no cause of ill-being, no end of ill-being, and no path, no understanding, no attainment, because there is no attain. The Bodhisattvas ground in Prajna Paramita find no obstacles for their being, no obstacles, they overcome fear, liberating themselves forever from illusion and realizing perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in the past, present, and future arrive at Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore one should know that perfect understanding, mantra, the unequaled mantra, the destroyer of ill-being, the incorruptible truth, the mantra, prajna paramita, should therefore be gate gate para samgate bodhi swaha gate para samgate Swaha gate para samgate bodhi swaha. Om mani padme hum, om mani padme hum, om mani padme, om mani padme hum, om mani padme hum, om mani padme hum, om mani padme, om mani padme hum, om mani padme hum, om mani padme hum, om mani padme, mani padme hum, om 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 mani padme, mani padme hum, om mani padme hum, om mani padme hum.
Transfer of merit. May
all beings without limit, without end, have a share in the merit just now made, and in whatever other merits I have made, those who are dear and kind to me, beginning with my mother and father, whom I have seen or never seen, and others neutral or hostile beings established in the cosmos, the three realms, the four modes of birth, with 5, 1, or 4 aggregate, wandering on from realm to realm. If they know of my dedication of merit, may they themselves rejoice, and if they do not know, may the devas inform by reason of their rejoicing in my gift of merit. May all happily, free from animosity, may they attain nirvana, and their radiant hopes be fulfilled.
the true refuge. I
Take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness.
Dwelling
In the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty in the world. Dwelling in the refuge of Dharma, I learn to open many doors on the path of transformation. Dwelling in the refuge of shining light that supports me, keeping my practice free of obstruction.
taking
Refuge in the Buddha, in myself I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realizing the mind of love, taking refuge in the Dharma in myself. I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation. Taking refuge in the Sangha in myself, I aspire to help all people build fourfold community, to embrace all beings and support their transformation.
sharing the merit, reciting
Reciting the sutras, practicing the way of awareness, gives rise to benefits without limits. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along